Scripture reading is Matthew 22, beginning at verse 15. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said. So they sent the disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one. For you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. Then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." Then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. That's how it usually goes. Well, there's good news, taxpayers. It's the 17th of April, and your federal taxes are not overdue. Because of a quirk of calendar, your federal tax return, and all the others for that matter, must be postmarked by tomorrow night in order to be considered timely filed. The quirk is Emancipation Day, which is observed in Washington, D.C. on the weekday closest to April 16th. So, when April 15th falls on a Friday, tax returns are due the following Monday. When April 15th falls on a Saturday or a Sunday, tax returns are due the following Tuesday. Now you know. It's just as well it falls on the 17th, because April 15th is already recognized as the day on which Lincoln died and the day the Titanic sunk. Adding taxes only makes it worse. Of course, April 15th is also the day that Samuel Johnson's dictionary was published, the day General Electric was formed, and the day insulin was available for diabetics, so maybe not all bad. The subject of taxes, however, brings out the sarcastic in most, if not all of us. Like, you may not agree with every department of the government, but you really have to hand it to the IRS. Death and taxes may always be with us, but at least death doesn't get worse every time Congress meets. Or even, I feel honored to pay taxes in America. The thing is, I could probably feel just as honored for about half the price. Sarcasm aside, most people do not enjoy paying taxes. Neither did people in Jesus' time. Worse, they had to pay them to a generally despised occupying force, Rome. A goodly portion of their gold ended up in Caesar's pocket, and this made Jews very unhappy. Thus, Jesus' dilemma when they asked him the loaded question, is it lawful, that is, under Jewish law, is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor, to Caesar, or not? Okay, does Jesus offend the Jews by siding with the Romans, or does he risk the wrath of the Romans by siding with the Jews? As we heard, Jesus does neither. "Who's this?" he says, pointing to the coin. "Caesar," they answer. "All right," he says. "To Caesar what's Caesar's, and to God what's God's." Classic answer, succinct, irrefutable, conversation ending. Actually, most of us don't have too many problems rendering to Caesar, at least in theory. The truth is, we have little choice. Like every other nation, we have a host of laws permitting direct and indirect taxation of citizens. Taxes, well, protesting taxes, actually got us started as a country. Inequitable British taxation policy was a cornerstone of the colonial revolution. We all know our own new federal government collected its own tariffs on imports, on whiskey, and, for a while, glass windows. States and localities collected poll taxes on voters and property taxes on land and commercial buildings. State and federal inheritance taxes began after 1900, while the states, but not the feds, began collecting sales taxes in the 1930s. We did have national income taxes briefly during the Civil War and the 1890s, but then on a permanent basis from 1913 with the passage of the 16th Amendment. Taxes are a quintessential political issue. We might just have some heated discussions about that subject, say, over the next 6 months or so, just a guess. Regardless, history shows that what Caesar wants, Caesar usually gets. Most always by consent, but sometimes with force or its threat. In any event, we have constant reminders that no polity is perfect, with the conceivable exception of Athens in its golden age. Good government is always a work in progress. Paul reminds his Roman readers about the duties one has concerning the state, even an imperfect one. He writes, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those authorities that exist have been instituted by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority, resists what God has appointed, and those who resist will incur judgment. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you wish to have no fear of authority? Then do what is good, and you will receive approval. For it is God's servant for your good. But if you do what is wrong, you should be afraid, for the authority does not bear the sword in vain. It is the servant of God to execute wrath on the wrongdoer. Therefore, one must be subject, not only because of wrath, but also because of conscience. For the same reason, you also pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants, busy with this very thing. Pay to all what is due to them. Taxes to whom taxes are due, revenue to whom revenue is due, respect to whom respect is due, honor to whom honor is due." Rendering unto Caesar, all right? But rendering unto God, that seems to be a much different issue. A recent survey of members of a leading denomination showed that among church alumni, that is, people who used to go to church but now don't, the number one complaint was that they heard about money too much. Now, some of that is pure rationalization, to be sure. But it is true that giving to God's work through a faith community can be difficult, and for two reasons. First, it's not hard to see that as a culture, we're still pretty darn materialistic. Of course, it's difficult to maintain our active, engaged, modern lifestyle and still have some time, talent, and treasure to give for God's work through any community of faith. We're sort of like the little boy who had two quarters, one intended for Sunday school and one for a candy. Walking along the street, one of the coins slips out of his hand, falls through the grate into the sewer below. The little boy raises his face toward heaven and says with genuine sorrow, "Well, God, there goes your quarter." It's amusing, but the statement is not entirely that sad. At least he knew who the quarters, both of them, really belonged to. But second, there's something intrinsically seductive about money. The more we have, the harder it is to part with it. Remember, Jesus said we can't worship both God and money. Money can be like a drug. It's useful sometimes to keep the flow of goods and services moving efficiently, and a whole lot better than bartering for everything. But also, like a drug, it can be misused or hoarded. It can be a kind of end in itself. That's probably why Jesus devoted more of his teaching to the warning about the perils of wealth than to any other single subject. He wasn't saying it's bad to own things, but he was warning us to be careful lest we get to the point where things own us. This isn't simply greed. In spiritual terms, this is idolatry. Jesus knew what he was talking about. The biggest worldwide religion, now as then, worships at the temple of Mammon. Easily. That was a lesson learned by the legendary John D. Rockefeller, developer of Standard Oil. He drove himself hard to be a success, and it worked. He was a millionaire by 23, and by 1890 he was the richest man on the planet. Then, at age 53, a serious stress-related illness laid him low. Among other things, the hair on his head, eyebrows, and eyelashes fell off. Even though he was the world's only billionaire and could have almost anything he wanted, he was reduced to milk and crackers. He was miserable. He couldn't sleep, wouldn't smile, and nothing in life meant much. Doctors predicted within a year he'd be dead. One night, however, as Rockefeller struggled to fall asleep, he came to grips with his life. Something happened. And he woke up with a new attitude. He still had a long way to go for physical recovery, but spiritually something had changed. Admittedly, he'd always been mindful of giving something to charity. But now he had the confidence to step up the pace. Within a few years, he'd taken on a number of philanthropic ventures, including establishing and funding the Rockefeller Foundation, which founded hospitals and paid for research and mission work. His contributions eventually helped enable the discovery of penicillin, as well as cures for malaria, tuberculosis, and diphtheria. At 53, he was given a year to live. Perhaps by God's grace, he learned how to live differently and better. The man who once said that the only happiness he knew was watching the dividends flow in, wound up admitting that every right implies a responsibility, every opportunity an obligation, every possession a duty. Not bad. I'm not saying there's a reproducible cause and effect here, but Rockefeller finally died at the ripe old age of 98. Of course, the worship of money and possessions is a profound, deadly, and widespread spiritual problem, and is the one that lies at the root of countless dispirited lives, corporate and national greeds, and thus conflicts. Some of you may remember the movie Oh God with George Burns. There's a cute part where we find out that the reason Adam and Eve didn't have clothes was because God knew that once they had clothes, they'd want pockets. And once they had pockets, they'd want stuff to put in them. Don't misunderstand. As you know, the scriptures do not say that money is evil. And it isn't. Money itself is morally neutral. It's the love of money that's the root of all evil. It's the worship of money, a psychic stand-in for stuff, generally, that puts it in competition with God. As I said, idolatry, one of the big 10 shout-knots. Idolatry, the spiritual transgression, not just ordinary plain vanilla greed. But back to the implied question in Jesus' answer about taxes. We render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, but how about giving to God the things that are God's? Understand, it's not because God needs anything. Caesar needed gold for, among other things, keeping soldiers in Judea. God doesn't need gold or anything else. But if we read the whole of the law, the prophets, and the Gospels, we do find something that God requires of us, but requires for our own sake. Micah puts it neatly. What does God require of us? Only to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. Only that. That's what the Almighty, the one who needs nothing, would like us to do. These are, I submit, what Jesus was talking about when he told his disciples to give to God what's due to God. but actually doing justice, loving kindness, and walking humbly with God requires a commitment of one's whole self, body, mind, and spirit, and that, friends, is a whole lot more difficult than even writing a check to the internal revenue service. According to a sad but untrue story, the king of a small country was in need of a champion to battle the fierce dragon of mortality, said to be in the form of a small white rabbit that was threatening the land. The one who could defeat this monster, however, would enjoy everlasting fame and glory, the admiration of the ages and the sages. There was enormous interest in this project throughout the populace. As you can imagine, people from all over gathered outside the palace, yelling and waving their hands, "Send me, send me!" The king didn't know what to do, but an idea popped in his head. He asked everyone to be quiet and told him the plan. He'd throw a feather down, and whoever the feather landed on, that person would have the honor of confronting the beast and winning the prize. The king then launched the feather out into the breeze, watched it drift back and forth. Everyone was still screaming and waving their hands, "Send me!" But with one difference. They're leaning their heads back and blowing the feather back into the air. "Send me! Send me! Send me!" We don't have much choice when it comes to paying taxes. Maybe that's why we don't have much trouble with it. We may even be willing to give a few coins and minutes to God. But our bodies, our minds, our hearts, sign me up, Lord. Good news includes this. When the Holy Spirit truly lives in our hearts, we will in fact find that rendering to God is easier and more important and a lot more enjoyable than rendering to Caesar. And thank God for that.